So our panelists today are going to talk about, in a little bit finer detail than I can provide, why it's important that we have a farm bill and why it's important that we get it passed, hopefully, this year. So with me on the panel today, I have Tina May. She is the senior professional staff for Senator Stabenow. She is the one responsible for crafting the conservation title of the Farm Bill. And she also has had a role working as a legislative director in the USDA office in D.C. And before that, she did a stint with Senator Harkin crafting the former Farm Bill many years ago. And a funny story is, before I introduce her, is that she does have a connection to the Great Lakes. She's an Iowa farm girl. However, I just learned today, though, that one of her first family vacations was to Lake Michigan. Her family has a cattle ranch, or still does, and one of the first trips she did was following the cattle truck to Zeeland to watch the cows being slaughtered. And then she went and visited Lake Michigan. So she's got that going for her. So that's her connection to the Great Lakes, which is nice. And then second, I'm going to introduce Joe Logan, who's the director of our agriculture programs at the Ohio Environmental Council. Before that, he was the president of the Iowa Farmers Union, and now he is an active, well, he has been a farmer, from dairy farms to dairy farmer to cattle, and to even grapes and wine. So this guy is a Renaissance man farmer. And then last, to bring up the caboose on our panel, is Gildo Tori, director of policy for Ducks Unlimited in the Great Lakes region out of Ann Arbor, former waterfowl biologist with the Ohio Department of Natural Resources, and he's a pretty good shot, I think, but that's for you to decide. So that's our panel, and they're going to give you a snapshot of where we are in the Farm Bill, what the Farm Bill does for the Great Lakes, and then we'll have a question and answer period for you all to ask questions about what this all means for your home state and what it means for our Great Lakes. So without further ado, I'm going to leave it to Tina May, to lead us off on our first panelist.
Thank you, Mark, for the introduction. I am an Iowa farm girl. I was just home in north central Iowa, where our farm is, over Labor Day weekend, and they're starting harvest there, one of the early harvests due to the drought that we've ever seen at home. And my mother was talking about how she loves the summer in Iowa because you look out the back window and you see the fields of corn blowing in the wind, and she was talking about how it looks like a sea of corn. I said, well, gosh, Mom, last week I was in the UP of Michigan. I saw Lake Superior out the review mirror and Lake Michigan out in front of me. You know, there's nothing like the Great Lakes. And I'm very proud to work for Senator Stabenow, the chair of the Ag Committee. It's so important that you're all here today. This really is a pivotal moment in ag policy in DC. We are smack dab in the middle of the Farm Bill process. I'm going to talk today a little bit about our process, sort of where we've come this past year, where we're at now in the process, and then I'm going to go over the conservation title of the Farm Bill. I know that Joe and Gildo are going to talk some more specifics about and how they specifically fit into conservation, so I'll try and not take up too much time. However, I know I could speak for a solid hour about my love for conservation. First of all, the representation on the Senate Ag Committee from the Great Lakes is pretty amazing. With Senator Stabenow as the chairwoman, we also have Senator Brown from Ohio, Senator Klobuchar from Minnesota, Senator Lugar from Indiana, and also Senator Gillibrand from New York State. That's pretty remarkable. We've never seen representation for the Great Lakes like we have currently on the Senate Ag Committee, and it is absolutely reflected in this Farm Bill. As you all know, Chairwoman Stabenow has always been a leader on Great Lakes issues. The very first bill that she passed into law was the ban on oil and gas drilling in the Great Lakes. That ban is now permanent. She was instrumental in the creation of GLRI, which we've talked about a lot already today, and we will for the remainder of this week. And she is also leading the efforts with Ohio Senators Brown and Portman on stopping Asian carp in the Great Lakes. So it was really only natural that when she sat down with us as staff to talk about what her priorities were in the Farm Bill, that conservation was one of the very top priorities that we talked about. So as Marc talked about the Farm Bill, he mentioned that it's one of the largest bills for conservation. It is the largest bill for conservation and environment. 70% of the United States is privately owned by our farmers and ranchers. The Farm Bill is the large omnibus 5-year bill that Marc discussed, and we don't see anything like it in Congress. It's 5 years, it's mandatory, 10-year spending, and it definitely trumps other environmental legislation that we see in Congress. So just rewinding a little bit about where we've come this past year and a half since Senator Stabenow has been the chair of the Ag Committee. Over the past year and a half, we've really seen the budget process drive the Farm Bill debate, and that was discussed on the earlier panel this morning about where we are with the continuing resolution and the budget situation in Congress. I won't go into that so much, I just want to focus on the bill. We've seen a number of plans come forward that cut agriculture. The biggest one that we saw was last year. Congressman Ryan, chair of the House Budget Committee, put forward a plan that would cut agriculture by $34 billion, and that was just in safety net programs. It would cut conservation by $18 billion, and this is important, I'm going to come back to this number. And he would cut nutrition programs by $127 billion. So a very significant cut to agriculture. Then last August, a year ago August, we saw Congress pass the Budget Control Act. This was the act that raised the debt ceiling and created the Joint Committee on Deficit Reduction, as we, and I will today refer to as the Super Committee. The Super Committee was given extraordinary flexibility and powers to come up with a plan that would reduce deficit spending by $1.2 trillion. And what they did was to task the committees of jurisdiction with coming up with the appropriate savings and report back to them by the end of the year, by the end of November last year. Well, Chairwoman Stabenow, if you would ask her directly, she got together with her counterparts in the House, Frank Lucas, the chair in the House Ag Committee, a Republican from Oklahoma, heart of the Dust Bowl, Colin Peterson, a Democrat from Minnesota. When we talk about conservation with Mr. Peterson, he talks a lot about the flooding in the Red River Valley area in Fargo. And Senator Roberts, who is a Republican from Kansas, who's our ranking member on the Senate committee. The four of them got together when the Super Committee was formed, and I think if you ask any of the four of them, they would say that they didn't even have to make the choice, that moving forward in a bipartisan, bicameral way was the only option for agriculture. So we worked night and day, weekend, didn't matter. We were at the office, and we were the only committee in the House and the Senate that worked together that came up with a plan to find savings. And our plan was $23 billion in savings, but in doing so, we did it in a very smart, tactful way, and if the Super Committee would have passed, we would have given them a complete Farm Bill proposal with the $23 billion in savings. So why the $23 billion? Big number. Agriculture is only 2% of federal outlays, 2%. So the fact that the Agriculture Committee was the only committee that did their job in a bipartisan way, and we're only 2% of the federal budget is pretty surprising. So $23 billion is 2% of the ag budget. So that's where that $23 billion comes from. So where did that $23 billion come from? Well, we saw numerous reforms in the safety net programs. We have eliminated direct payments in the proposal, direct subsidies. We saved $14 billion by doing that. we saved $6 billion out of the conservation title. And I'll go into this in a little further detail in a few minutes. And we saved $4 billion by making some tweaks to nutrition programs and eliminating fraud and abuse. The whole time we were doing the super committee process last fall, we were collecting tons of input from your organizations, Gildo, Joe, Marc, their organizations. We were constantly asking for feedback, calling farmers, what worked, what didn't. We had numerous lengthy meetings with the USDA about what was working in the 2008 Farm Bill and what we could make better in this Farm Bill. One of the things we certainly heard about quite a bit was the regional differences, particularly in our safety net programs, but also for conservation. We see the Conservation Reserve Program work very well in the Dust Bowl area, but perhaps it needs to be tweaked a little bit to work better in our Great Lakes states. I want to come back to that in a little bit, but when we talk about the conservation title and all of the input that we received, where we're at now, we have 643 nationwide conservation organizations representing all 50 states that have signed off on our approach to what we have done in our Senate-passed bill. So the Senate Ag Committee passed the bill out of committee at the end of April. It was a record-breaking time. We passed it in 4.5 hours. The 2008 Farm Bill passed out of committee in almost 2 days. So we put the pedal to the metal. We saw no amendments to the conservation title in committee. We then moved to the full Senate floor, where we had voted on 73 amendments. The bill was not filibustered. We never had to do any cloture votes. We really worked through regular order. And under the leadership of Senator Stabenow, we got the bill done. It took 3 weeks. But we've got it done, and that passed on June 21st. So then the ball got kicked over to the House. The House Ag Committee passed their bill the second week of July. Their markup took about 18 hours, I believe. They had a number of amendments on conservation, but I would be remiss if I didn't discuss the House Ag Committee's bill on conservation. It's awesome. They used a lot of the language that we came up with together during the super committee process. Having worked through that together with their staff, we really don't have a lot of differences between the two conservation titles. We certainly have some differences elsewhere in the bill that we'll need to work through once we get to a conference type situation. But conservation looks great, and they did a really good job. However, the House leadership has not yet brought that bill up on the House floor. It is something that they need to do yet if we're going to get a bill done this year. So what was in the conservation title? I don't think I really have to say it to this group, but Chairwoman Stabenow fundamentally believes that production agriculture and conservation go hand in hand. Being a farm kid from Iowa and coming to Michigan quite a bit over the last 1.5 years with the senator, I've been blown away by the conservation ethic of the farmers in the Great Lakes states. It's really like nothing else. And if there are farmers in the room today, it seems to be inherent for them that they think about the Great Lakes and the quality and way of life that they have in these Great Lakes states. It's not like anything I have certainly seen growing up in north central Iowa. So when we were having all of those meetings with the groups, talking to farmers, USDA, we really looked at where there was overlap in our conservation programs and how we could tweak them and make them better. And depending on how you count all of the conservation programs out there under the 2008 Farm Bill, there are 23 conservation programs. What we've done in the Senate-passed Farm Bill is a large consolidation effort, and by doing that, we've brought the number of conservation programs down to 13. We've done this in a way, however, that farmers and you as partners will still have all the tools in the toolbox that you're used to, but they're organized in a little bit more streamlined and coherent way. So just walking through quickly the toolboxes that we like to talk about. I'll talk about 4 main areas in the conservation title: our working lands programs, conservation easements, the CRP program, and the new program that we're really the most excited about is the Regional Conservation Partnership Program. Our working lands programs, you guys know these as EQIP, CSP, WIP, Wildlife Habitat Incentives programs. EQIP is really our big boy on the block, bricks and mortar for farmers. They have a problem, EQIP helps them solve it. It's been around since '96. It's working really, really well. We didn't really change much. We wanted to make sure that it had solid funding as we move forward, and we did that. One of the things that we did do, however, is the Wildlife Habitat Incentives Program had some changes made during the '08 bill, where not a lot could be done under WIP that couldn't be done under the EQIP program. So we moved WIP up into EQIP. Gildo can talk about this later if you're interested in wildlife habitat specifically. But great buy-in from organizations, and certainly that proposal had been on the table for a number of years. It wasn't new, it was something old that we resurrected. The easement program, this is something that we're pretty proud of, that took a significant effort. We have 3 different easement programs in the conservation title. Farmland Protection Program, which helps protect against urban sprawl. The Wetlands Reserve Program, which is one of the most successful conservation programs we've seen, which is one of the reasons why we have a no net loss of wetlands in this country. And GRP, the Grasslands Reserve Program. FPP has had a permanent stream of funding. However, WRP and GRP do not. It's cyclical, it's on the 5-year Farm Bill cycle, as Marc talked about before. One of the things that we talked through with USDA quite a bit is it's not up to the states, it's not up to the farmers really to decide what they want. For example, Arizona gets Wetlands Reserve Program funding every year. Well, they don't spend it, so what happens is it gets shipped back to USDA. The money gets shipped back to USDA. USDA does a call out to their state conservationists. Michigan raises their hand and says, I can spend all of this, give it to me. And then Michigan has to hustle to get all those dollars obligated by the end of the fiscal year. So we consolidated all those programs under one large umbrella. Happy to talk about this in greater detail, but I wanna move on and for the sake of time. Conservation Reserve Program. This is really one of the cornerstone programs in the conservation title. It's been around for 26 years. We've seen great success. However, it's a little bit old, and we had to modernize it quite a bit. We've seen great success in Ohio and Michigan with some of the buffer and filter initiatives. I'm sure a lot of you are very familiar with this. But we're trying to get away from some of the whole farm, whole field enrollment that hasn't been so popular in CRP in the last couple years, and make sure we're really getting the best bang for our buck on the ground through that program. And our favorite program that we like to talk about is the Regional Conservation Partnership Program. This program really was born out of several conversations the senator had with a number of you, a number of other groups throughout Michigan, throughout the country, and really the success of GLRI. This is not meant to replace GLRI. This is solely a complement to it. And one of the things we're most excited about is it has permanent funding, it has a 10-year baseline, and I want to talk about, it has dual funding streams, and I'll talk about that in a minute, but Regional Conservation Partnership Program is a consolidation of 4 programs that existed under the 2008 Farm Bill. AWIP, Ag Water Enhancement Program, CCPI, Cooperative Conservation Partnership Initiative, the standalone Chesapeake Bay Watershed Initiative Program, and then the line item earmark that was the Great Lakes Basin Program for Sediment Reduction and Erosion Control, which was an earmark and hadn't been funded in a couple of years. The Chesapeake Bay program was also an earmark, so we had to get rid of that as well. AWIP and CCPI had come up through the ranks starting in the '02 Farm Bill and had been successful, but they were a little bit disjointed, a little bit clumsy. We weren't quite getting the results that we wanted to see. And when we looked at the success of GLRI, I came out to a Western Lake Erie Basin partnership meeting and really thought it through with a bunch of partners and farmers. This was really our effort to really target funds, to really focus funds where they're needed the most. And for the first time ever in a farm bill, we're able to do it through this program. And Joe and Gildo are going to talk more specifics, but the dual funding stream here is there's a permanent baseline of $1 billion over 10 years, so $100 million each year. However, that's mandatory, so you don't have to go beg appropriators for it every year. You just have to beg appropriators not to cut it every year. The dual funding stream, the second stream of funding that comes in on the top is having this be my second farm bill on the conservation title. It's tricky when appropriators go to cut you every year because you lose funding, you lose baseline as you go forward. So one of the things we did is we took 8% of funding off the top of our other conservation programs that will filter into regional partnerships as a second funding stream to make sure that even if we are cut in the appropriations process, we're never cut bad enough, and we always have that second funding stream. So 100 million mandatory. The dual funding stream provides 180 million. So we'll have a total of about 250 to 280 million for this program every year. It's split up into 3 pots of money. There'll be a nationwide pot for a larger nationwide sign-up. That will be 50% of the funding. 25% of the funding will be directly allocated to states, like our traditional NRCS programs are now. And then here's one of the most exciting parts, we think. 25% of the money will be held in a pot for what we call critical conservation areas. We couldn't name names in the statute because we can't earmark anymore, as you all know. But we have specific requirements written into the legislation about what constitutes a critical conservation area. Well, an area that is dealing with a natural resource regulatory requirement, an area that has binational, that was a good one Gildo came up with, that touches 2 countries. Areas that are, will affect more producers through the conservation efforts. And the way this works, it really leverages funding like no other conservation program we've ever seen. Partners like yourselves, I'll just use NWF and DU as an example. NWF, DU come to the table. They tell the secretary what they need, not the other way around. This is really from the grassroots bottom up. They tell the secretary the resources that they need, the farmers that they're going to target. They bring the farmers to the table. The farmers say, yep, I'm in. We're going to do some buffers through EQIP. Maybe we're going to do some whole farm planning through CSP. Secretary says, okay, signs a 5-year contract. 5-year contract, you know that you have that source of funding for 5 years. There's some monitoring and evaluation and reporting requirements built into the back end. I'm gonna stop. I could go on. I'm gonna stop and let Joe and Gildo talk. And I've really eaten up a lot of this time. But I think it's important to just mention for you all the key themes that we've really seen emerge for conservation in the Farm Bill process so far. We've built in components of flexibility, accountability, program simplification, and components of local control. And when I say local control, I mean putting this really back into the farmers' hands. What do they need? What do you as partners need on the ground to accomplish your goals? We've really built in a greater aspect of helping producers avoid and comply with environmental regulations. And then the one critical piece that's going to stick no matter what is anything that looked or smelled like an earmark was consolidated into something else. So We certainly need to move forward this year to lock in the gains that we've made. The House needs to pass their bill by the end of this calendar year, by the end of this Congress, or we start all over next year. If we start all over next year, we will have a much smaller baseline for conservation, and the $6 billion that we did cut out of the conservation title through some very strategic movements within our programs is going to be a lot greater than the $6 billion. So getting a farm bill done this year is something that we are working very hard on, and I hope that you can all help us by speaking to your members in the House and making sure they know how important a farm bill is this year. Happy to answer any questions afterwards.
Thank you, Tino. I'm going to bring up Joe Logan with the Ohio Environmental Council. I'll pull up his PowerPoint right here. So, Joe?
Thank you very much. Yes, we actually wanted Tina to keep going a little bit here to run out the ball, but no, thank you very much, Tina. And of course, I'm going to be very brief so that we'll have plenty of time for questions and answers later on. But yes, as I think Tina mentioned, the Federal Farm Bill is the #1 source of conservation dollars nationally. It's, we love conservation in any shape, any form, from any source, but the Farm Bill is one of the major sources. So once again, traditionally and historically, the way conservation had happened is kind of the duality of land conservation. That's the way Tina mentioned also the Dust Bowl, which is essentially the genesis of the Farm Bill. And of course, the Dust Bowl was both an ecological and an economic catastrophe back in the 30s. And the way they decided to deal with it is the twofer that you get for land retirement. You get a conservation benefit, and you also get an economic benefit by reducing the amount of commodities that would have been grown on that farmland. So traditionally, the NRCS, National Resource Conservation Service, and the Farm Service Agency, the two of the current day agencies that administer Farm Bill programs, have generally done this according to a fairly even-handed way. And Tina mentioned that scenario, and frankly what we want to do is create a little bit of an information opportunity here to talk about the new conservation partnership programs that Tina mentioned and how they differ from the old programs. Essentially, it was an old block grant program. The USDA would send monies out to state conservationists and out to the farm service agencies in the various states, and they would essentially try to distribute it so every county, every producer had an opportunity to partake. It's a very even-handed method, but frankly, it was perhaps not the most strategic method. So once again, it had a lot of people receiving funds, and it was based on the acreage that was available and the number of farms in a particular state or locality. Now, NRCS, our state conservationist here in Ohio, Tori Cosby, has referred to this often as random acts of conservation. And I think obviously if you talk about random acts of conservation, there are probably some ways you can do things differently and do things better. And the regional partnership program that Tina mentioned is really an approach and an attempt to really be more strategic about the way conservation is applied. And of course, certain regions, as was mentioned before, clamor for additional contributions and additional focus. Great Lakes, as was mentioned, and is critically important to us. Chesapeake Bay, that we are very familiar with the program there. Everglades, Gulf of Mexico, Dead Zone. All of these areas really clamor for additional focus and concentration of dollars. And the regional conservation programs actually focus dollars on these areas of greatest concern. And of course, the program allows federal agencies to also leverage these very scarce dollars by linking up with local partnerships and nonprofits. And here in the Great Lakes area, we're delighted that the Great Lakes is one of those focuses due to Gildo's brilliant language there about areas that affect two countries. Lake Erie and the Great Lakes are very central to this Regional Conservation Partnership Initiative. And of course, you know, among the Great Lakes, Lake Erie is perhaps the canary in the coal mine, we think. Obviously, it's the most southern of the Great Lakes, the most highly developed, and the shallowest. So that makes it predisposed to a number of things which are not particularly flattering. And of course, we've got a photo up here of some of the harmful algae blooms that have burdened Lake Erie over the last several years. So we think that USDA funding funding is appropriate to target the Great Lakes. And of course, a lot of this targeting, it makes sense that it would come through the Farm Bill because many of these Great Lakes issues have an agricultural connection. Agriculture in this country, for better and for worse, has become a relatively industrial process. Agricultural producers here in this region and globally actually import millions of pounds, thousands of tons of phosphorus and nitrogen annually, apply them to their crop fields in order to maintain their productivity. And for better and for worse, some of these nutrients don't go where they're intended, and some of them end up finding their ways into surface water. Obviously, nutrient pollution and the associated harmful algae blooms are one of the primary focuses of the Great Lakes region. As we said before, we've got a little bit of a leaky system out there made up of a number of issues. First of all, we've got large quantities of nutrients coming in, a number of vectors by which these nutrients can leave the farm fields and find their ways into surface waters, not only through climate-induced intense storms that we are more likely to see these in recent decades, but also we are now discovering that perhaps up to 40% of the dissolved phosphorus that actually arrives in surface waters may travel there by subsurface drainage. And by the way, we happen to live in a region of the country that is the most intensively drained of any in the world. So it has been kind of a brilliant idea, as we've discussed briefly before, to leverage these funds by linking up with organizations that work that are already at work in areas around the Great Lakes. And just a couple of examples of the sorts of organizations that are going on working right here in Ohio and the Great Lakes region now. Environmental Defense has a program where they are working with farmers in the Western Lake Erie Basin on application of nutrients according to some high-tech methods of GIS systems and soil type-based systems. And it's been very efficient at actually teaching those farmers how to continue to maintain high productivity while reducing nutrient applications. TNC, I see Carrie down here, has been working very hard to implement a nutrient certification program for ag supply providers around the Western Lake Erie Basin area. And of course, Ducks Unlimited works not only in this area, but nationwide on restoration of wetlands. Those are the sorts of programs that would be available under this. Now, of course, I am just kind of setting the table here for Gildo, who is going to go on and build upon this a bit more. But essentially, this is our desired outcome here, a healthy and sustainable Lake Erie program. And obviously, the potential for opportunities, multiplicity of opportunities are almost inexhaustible. Imagination is the only limitation. So with that, then, I'm going to turn this back over to Gildo and to Marc. And thank you very much.
Thanks, Joe. One thing I'll say about Gildo is that he has about 25 states on his portfolio, so all it's missing for him is a cape because he's a superhero. All right, where is this? Here we go. Okay, Gildo?
Okay, well, thank you very much. We've just got a few moments left, so I'm going to go fairly quickly. But I just want to say how encouraged I was to hear Tina talk. I mean, I think a lot of us have been a bit confounded thinking that Congress isn't working very well. And I think if you heard from Tina's remarks, the leadership of Senator Stabenow in crafting a bipartisan farm bill, working hand in hand with Ranking Member Senator Roberts, and then, of course, in the House with Lucas and Peterson, and actually coming up with a bill that is awesome for agriculture, fantastic for conservation, and of course important for the folks that need the nutrition program. So what a refreshment to see Congress working well with great leadership. And also I just want to say a heads up of thanks to the staff director, Chris Adamo, and of course Tina for reaching out and working with us groups. I mean, it was absolutely essential as we're working through the Farm Bill. Things came up and we got calls and we did conference calls and we sat down and wrestled with this stuff at all hours of the day and night to craft this bill. And what a testimony to our servants in Congress, how great they reached out to us. So thank you very much, Tina. Pass that on to Senator Stabenow and to Chris as well. I'm going to focus a little bit on the Regional Conservation Partnership Program. And you heard a little bit about it. It's kind of a consolidation of a lot of the programs that were out there and kind of fractured. So it's kind of consolidated them all into one program, and it's going to further conservation, restoration, and sustainable use of our soil and water resources, and of course, wildlife and related natural resources. And I think another key thing that it does is it's, of course, going to encourage partnerships to be cooperative with each other, to meet and cooperate with producers in the agricultural industry and agricultural businesses that are out there, to meet and avoid regulatory requirements and get conservation done. This is critical here, and Tina, I have to give a lot of hats off to you folks for establishing a big chunk of mandatory funding and then another stream of additional funding. When you think about it, she said $250 to $280 million per year. I mean, the GLRI is $250 to $300 million. So this is another big chunk that we in the Great Lakes have a great opportunity to grasp and use. And she mentioned the 3 areas, and obviously the Great Lakes is in there as one of those 6 key areas through some creative verbiage, but that means we also can tap those other 2 sources of funds as well. So what's our advantage in the Great Lakes? We're a large geographical area with intensive and diverse agriculture, lots of private lands, agricultural producers. We have a huge drainage basin with lots of water. We have critical water conservation issues. We have existing federal and state restoration plans. And of course, we have a great history of partnerships and collaboration and success. And of course, we're also binational. So what do we need to do here? We have a great chance and great opportunity to take advantage of this program once it's passed in Congress. And you know, we have to sit down as a community and decide where would be our most critical locations or watershed. Western Lake Erie Basin obviously is one, but we have to look comprehensively throughout the Great Lakes to determine where do we want to work together. What's going to be our target issues? Is it going to be just phosphorus, soluble phosphorus? Is it going to be tile drainage systems? Is it going to be restoring wetlands? Decisions we need to make. Who are some of the potential partners? Joe shared some of those with you, but you know, we always want to look at the Ducks Unlimited, Nature Conservancy, Pheasants Forever, conservation organizations. But I think this program is a great opportunity for us to reach across and work with our agricultural partners. Something that we've not done very well, and I think something as we do and bring them on board, we can do great things together. The funding is there, boots on the ground we need, and we need some diverse strategies. So, these are existing programs that are out there. Next steps is we have to get the House of Representatives to pass this farm bill. If you haven't, please do make contact with your House member and say, we need a 5-year farm bill now. And then a challenge for us as Great Lakes partners, we need to begin collaborating soon to start to prepare ourselves to take advantage of this program. I guarantee you folks in the Chesapeake Bay are preparing, people in the Red River Valley are, the lower Mississippi Valley, Puget Sound. So the Great Lakes needs to get on the ball, get on the stick, and work together to take advantage of this new and exciting program. So with that, I think we're going to have Marc come back up, take your questions, take your ideas. If you have thoughts, let us know and hear about them. So Marc, thank you.
Well, thanks, Gildo. As he mentioned, we had a great panel that really put together, again, the question, what is the Farm Bill going to do for the Great Lakes? And before we get into the questions and answers, I want to take the liberty of one commentary, because I think we're just to pull out and really bring it home for folks. And if you look at this Regional Conservation Partnership Program, it's really a unique and new way of looking at providing a sustainable funding source that will be complementary to the GLRI. We only hope that whoever wins in November, whether it's Obama or Romney, will continue this program. And that has been so successful. It's proven to show that if you invest in the Great Lakes, it returns money and to benefits the economy. So one idea to look at this program is really a Great Waters program, in that it picks out these targeted areas that need assistance, that have plans, as you've heard before, and really focuses dollars in the regions to really improve water quality, to improve soil, and to help farmers be even better conservation partners on the ground. So this is an opportunity for us as the Healing Our Waters Coalition to really push this and take advantage of this, because this could duplicate the efforts on the GLRI and potentially be a more sustainable, longer-term, authorized program that we're not fighting to get every year, but as Tina said, we're fighting to stop getting cuts. So this is a really unique, and really hats off to the Stabenow's office for really thinking big here, and really looking outside the box to create a new and unique program that is going to benefit the Great Lakes amongst all our other Great Lakes programs. So with that, we have about, let's say 28 minutes? Okay, 8 minutes for questions. So please, please take questions now. Yes, right here, young lady.
I'm a little short for this, but you guys, that's all right. It'll be entertaining. I have some concerns for the $26 million that was just released through USDA for the Conservation Innovative Grants involving water quality trading credits. Did you guys address that when you talked about the Farm Bill? How do you think that'll impact what we're doing for water quality here?
Is that aimed at Tina, I'm assuming?
Yeah, that'll be all right.
Okay.
Sure.
We did not specifically address water quality trading in the Farm Bill as a specific issue. Certainly, if water quality trading is something that partners want to take a look at, we have options in the Farm Bill. The Conservation Innovation Grants is one area, also through the partnership program. If organizations want to come together in an innovative, collaborative way and work on some of those issues, that's another vehicle. There's also another provision in the Farm Bill. It's called, I believe, environmental service markets, and they're tasked with looking at carbon and trading and some of these issues that you mentioned around water. They have established a separate standalone office at USDA. They're housed under the Undersecretary of the Natural Resources and Environment, and they're working out the kinks. They've been up and running for about the past 4 or 5 years, but we're allowing them to continue to run under this Farm Bill as well.
Just to add to that, obviously there's a great clamor in the agricultural community looking for the sorts of dollars that could incentivize individuals to do something differently, to expose themselves to some risk of not maximizing production in an interval while corn is $8 a bushel and soybeans $17. And in order to get enough funds amassed in order to entice farmers to do the right thing, to adopt conservation, to retire critical lands, maybe you need another source of revenue, and perhaps trading can provide those funds. That said, I think it's absolutely critical, and I know that there is some serious concern about whether or not there is enough measurement, monitoring, and verification involved with these particular programs, and that's something we'll certainly be watching.
Yes, Rich.
Hi, Rich Bowman with Nature Conservancy. Tina, this is a question for you. We tend to talk a lot about agriculture and farmland, but the Farm Bill is actually a private lands conservation program, and half of our land cover in the Great Lakes region is forested land cover, and about half of that is in private ownership and eligible for participation in the Farm Bill programs. I know in 2008 we sort of combined farmland and forest conservation under EQIP and a couple other programs. Can you talk a little bit about how the committee thought about forested lands and how they're treated in the Farm Bill?
Rich, great question. Thanks for bringing it up. Certainly with Senator Stabenow at the helm of the committee, we thought about forestry in a much more holistic, different way this Farm Bill than we have in Farm Bills past, with 18 million acres of non-industrial private forest land in Michigan. For the very first time ever, non-industrial private forest land and our tree farmers have access to the full suite of conservation programs in the conservation title. We made some small steps, as Rich mentioned, during the 2008 Farm Bill, allowing them access to EQIP and also CSP. However, there were some minor issues that really held them back and didn't give them the full access that they really deserved. And they certainly will have full access to the partnership program as well. There's also one other issue that I did not mention when I was speaking, and I'm sure there are about 27 that I didn't mention. One thing I think you all deserve to know is that this Farm Bill, for the first time ever, as taxpayers, we will spend more on conservation than on commodity programs. That's a big deal. We've never done that before in a Farm Bill.
Yes.
A couple questions. One, if this isn't enacted here yet this fall, do you anticipate any kind of lengthy rulemaking period, or when will this partnership program be ready to go and hit the ground? And then if you could talk a little bit more about what these conservation partnerships ought to look like. I mean, how should they be formed? What kind of support would be considered a successful partnership?
Okay, so the question would be, when would rulemaking take effect if we get a bill passed out, and what would a project look like?
Partnership.
Partnership project, an example.
Sure. Really good questions again. I noticed this morning when I was looking at the agenda that Chief Dave White of NRCS is coming to talk tomorrow. I talked to the chief yesterday about rulemaking and where we're at and how fast we can get an RFP out for partnerships. And as both Gildo and Joe mentioned, this is going to be, if you build it, they will come, not the other way around. USDA will be pretty speedy on rules this time around if Obama wins a second term. Remember that during the last Farm Bill, we saw Obama come into office right after we passed the Farm Bill and as we were getting rules out the door, and that really significantly slowed us down. If Obama wins a second term, that's going to be pretty speedy. We'll see these rules roll out a lot faster than we have before. And on the question of what does a successful partnership look like, in my mind, to be quite honest, when I came back from the Western Lake Erie Basin leadership meeting last June, I believe, over a year ago, I sort of came back to the office with my hair on fire, running around saying, we can do this. They're already doing it. We just need to build it for them. They're already doing the work. So you guys are the example. You guys are the success story already, and you're doing it right. As Gildo and Joe both mentioned, we just need to make sure we continue that, and we focus our efforts and our time, and then eventually our taxpayer dollars where they can do the most good.
Yes.
My name is Pat Carey, and I am in Ohio. I serve on a soil and water conservation board, and I also serve as an officer of a organization that's called a Resource Conservation and Development Council. Ours is the Western Reserve Resource Conservation and Development Council. They are located all over the country, and they are multi-county. Their funding has come through the Farm Bill and through NRCS, which funds a coordinator for each of these multi-county, and we have 9 counties, RC&Ds and office space. Beyond that, the RC&Ds help people and on their own go for federal grants and then try to match those grants locally, and we've been successful in doing so on a 9-to-1 kind of basis. The funding for our coordinators and our offices got cut in 2011. I believe it was the appropriations actually that cut that, not the Farm Bill. I am anxious to know whether that program is still being discussed in the Farm Bill and where it stands. And in particular, since it does tend to bring in so much in the way of local and private money, I hope it's going to survive.
So the RC&D program is not a Farm Bill program, and it has never been historically. It's been one of those programs similar to GLRI that we've had to fight for appropriations every year. Unfortunately, the funding, as you mentioned, for that program was zeroed out 2 years ago through the appropriations process. It's not in the Farm Bill. It's not something that we do.
I'm surprised. I'm sorry, I didn't realize that.
I think the RCPP, the Regional Conservation Partnership Program, though, is an excellent opportunity for RC&Ds to receive funding to help, implement the conservation program. So I think it's a great opportunity for them, and hopefully they'll be engaged in developing the partnerships and partnership proposals for the program.
We've done a lot of that, and I hope we will be too. Thank you.
Also, we just got the 1-minute sign, but we actually have 5 minutes left because we got an extra 5 minutes.
Oh, I think we got it.
Yeah, well, I think that is our time. I want to make sure that everyone can get to our field trips on time. I want to thank you guys for attending this. I guess the go-away message here is we need a Farm Bill this year. Next year, the budget situation is much worse. So let's take advantage of the good bill that Senator Stabenow and Senator Roberts crafted in the Senate and push it forward. Again, thank you. We'll be around for other additional questions if you guys have something that comes up in your mind later. But other than that, thank you very much.
Good job.
Good job.